It's been 12 years since the ground zero moment of punk rock. The punk DIY message of creating alternatives to the mainstream, form a band, start a label, write a fanzine, has created a wave of excitement and independent activity across the UK. It's 1988. The internet is still 5 years away for most people, so artists communicate via the mail system, sending letters and cassette tapes of original music to like-minded people that they find through the network. This is cassette culture.
And it was a lot of magic, not only getting tapes from here in the United States, but eventually I made contacts all over the world, and it was pretty damn magical when I would get a tape from Iceland or from Japan. It was a whole new world in a lot of ways. I was getting sometimes 5, 10, 20 tapes a day.
There were flyers galore inside. You'd get a cassette, and then they'd be thinking, God, there's another label that I've never heard of. I'll write to them. I was going to send them some flyers, get them to send me some flyers. And every time you'd be writing to somebody, the letter package would be getting bigger and bigger because you'd be distributing everybody else's flyers. So, you know, that's the way the word was spread.
The mailman was also a very big fan of me because he said, "Oh, I always have to drop funny art and funny packages in your mailbox." So my mailbox really every day there was a letter or 2 letters or a package. Yeah, it was like Christmas every day.
Hi, I'm Martin Franklin.
Hi, I'm Hudson Graham.
We're producing a podcast series that explores the cassette culture of the 80s and 90s, of which I was a part. Hudson's going to ask me some questions that help me tell the story that'll set the scene for what you'll hear after this.
Yeah. So let's get amongst it. All right. We're talking back before the internet. How did you come about to make a record label?
It's definitely well before the internet. So we're talking about the late 80s. My situation at the time was I was one of the many unemployed creative people in the UK. And although myself and, you know, a lot of the people that I hung out with were sort of technically unemployed, we were using our time to do our own creative and artistic projects. And we either had, you know, the weekly dole money to survive off of, or what I ended up doing in that period was signing up for a thing called the Enterprise Allowance Scheme, which was a government incentive that let you officially develop your ideas into a little micro business. There was already a strong community of music and bands and people putting on gigs, you know, producing artwork as part of that with flyers and posters for gigs in a very sort of DIY manner. We're talking about, you know, cut up bits of newspaper and photocopies, and it was all there was no desktop publishing available to most people. So it was all very, very handmade. And as part of that, I came across the cassette network. Artists sending cassettes to other artists, I think.
Yeah, right. So sharing the music. Creating networks by sharing.
Yeah, very much so. And I think it was that kind of drive of find the like-minded people or find people who just might enjoy listening to what you were doing and just sort of sharing that. When I was kind of working on the little set of things that I wanted to do, then legitimizing a cassette label was the thing that I did. So I started SoundImage tapes.
Right. So you created a label so that you could put out a compilation.
Yeah, it was just like, I guess initially it was just a sort of container for ideas without really, you know, there wasn't a great deal of planning of it, but it just legitimized this idea of being a publisher of
got you.
stuff.
An identity, really.
Yeah,
something
exactly.
to
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what's sort of cool about it is it's like as soon as you just have the idea, then you can make it so. You can
build it, and they'll come.
Yeah, indeed. You can become the label if just by saying that you are a label. I think there was a bit of self-interest in it, in as much as I was working with in a few different groups with different kinds of music, and so my early releases were my own stuff.
Yep.
And then the idea of a compilation release came up. So I tried to distribute calls for submission to other people and pull that together into one of the releases. So that was the Premonitions release. And I think it was probably the first time I'd actually reached out to more overseas artists as well. So I'd had that call published in ND and Vital, so I started getting submissions from the USA and more European artists. Usually people would send you they'd either send you like a tape album or something where there was just a couple of tracks. So I would listen through those and then select what I felt would kind of fit together. So it was a bit of a jigsaw puzzle process of just finding pieces of music that kind of felt like they had a flow and would sit together well.
And so why are we here in 2024 talking about this? Like, what came up to jog all this, pull me into the whirlpool?
So this is one of the most amazing things. I mean, since those cassette days, I'd had quite a long music career and artistic career doing various things, but suddenly 35 years later, out of the blue, somebody approached me and said, I'd like to re-release this Premonitions cassette that you've done. And it was Tom Gibbs, who's also back in the UK and runs a label called Infinite Expanse, which kind of has this theme of like mining gems from the underground in this kind of early period where things are a lot more kind of fuzzy and undocumented. So
right, so there's people now that have realised, there's stuff that's not completely in your face via digital, and you can try and find these underground gems, which are obviously more unique, harder to find.
It's not at all. It's just like none of it is on Spotify or, it's not streaming at all. Some of the artists I've stayed in contact with ever since, like Sandy from Hybryds, but others I just lost touch with through time and moving house and losing addresses and that kind of thing, because this is also a pre-mobile phone era as well.
Yeah, the post.
Yeah, you kind of wonder how did we actually get by at all, really?
We did it.
Well, it somehow worked. Yeah. So I spent a while trying to track down, and some artists I couldn't find, but eventually I did track down most of them, and it was all done through little bits of internet detective work. So some people I contacted through the Discogs website. So, for instance, Anthony Burnham, who is on Premonitions as Antonym, I think he'd left a comment on one of the releases. He wasn't actually like listed as, if you want to contact Antonym, here's his email address. Like he had left a comment on some other release. And I just had a suspicion that because of what he'd said, I kind of thought, actually, that's a bit of a insider thing to say. So I just kind of sent him like an internal, message that you can do through Discogs, and just said, you are not Antonym himself, are you? And then he came back, I am he, and here's my email address, and then let's talk. So I got a hold of him through that. And actually I got hold of Rob Maycock from Mindscan Records through the same route.
I was early 20s, and I think these were like Thatcher years. And Thatcher was sort of like, if you were unemployed in Thatcher years, it was hard to get off that unemployment heap, basically. So, yeah, you had to create your own enjoyment, and that's what we did. I do remember sending out flyers where it would say, like, UK Electronics wanted, industrial, ambient, blah, blah, blah. And then I changed the name of the label to Mindscan. I'd always loved a wide variety of music, but I wasn't getting sent anything like that to be used on any compilations. So when people like Richard started sending stuff, at last, this is music is brilliant. It's a time before the internet, and for that music to shine from there, from that time to shine now, is like brilliant.
I've been trying to get hold of Richard for a long time. I think I've probably been trying to find him, on and off over like 10 years or something, right. Because we'd done such good stuff together, and we'd done the release with him, and I'd got a little TV spot for him back in the early 90s as well, when he came and did the concert at Windsor Arts Centre that I put on with Peter Appleton. Anyway, somehow or other, I got hold of him through a filing on Company's House, where I also found out that he had a married name. A month or so later, I actually got an email from Richard.
So the message was passed on.
Suddenly, out of the blue, here's Richard saying, "I heard you were looking for me."
Wow.
Obviously, the Premonitions cassette was a big one for me because it had the track, which was the first track that I'd done where I really, really felt like I've captured it, I've done it, I've connected with it. That's caught it. That's done it. And so that was on that compilation. I think they were all done in. I moved to a new house in Leeds, and I had an attic room. It was my first time having a room of my own to make music in, and it was freezing. It was so cold. And I'd play, and then suddenly realised I can't play anymore because my fingers don't work. But yeah, and all I had, like I say, literally all I had was the MMT8, the Yamaha Port Studio, and the Korg DS8, and I did everything with just that Korg DS8. And I just had to learn to program it and stuff. But I think like using just one synth gave it a sort of sense of continuity. And then I sent it to you. I remember sending it to you. I don't remember how it connected with you. And you were putting on this game and said, "Do you want to play?" And I came down to your place in Windsor, and we ran it off there, off the Porter Studio. And that was it.
this episode you heard the voices of Don Campau, Rob Maycock, Sandy Nice and Richard Talbot. The music was This Is Concrete by The Happy Citizen from A Tender Tension on Pharoah Chromium sound. Untitled by the Vitamin B12 from Premonitions on Infinite Expanse. Piece 6 by the Omega Ensemble from their cassette Sil Lim Tao. Sahara by Richard Talbot from Devices and Desires on SoundImage tapes.
I had thousands of tapes in a box and I went through a lot of them. It took me days, but I got them all.
Next episode, we hear about the chance meeting that led Richard Talbot to form Marconi Union, creators of Weightless, the track played over 300 million times on Spotify.
We'll also be speaking to the 90s tape label runner Steve Gears of Pharoah Chromium Sound and Tom Gibbs from Infinite Expanse. We'll be hearing about how Tom tracked down the original members of the Omega Ensemble.